Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I guess my first question would be, I right off the bat love all of the titles for the tracks. And I know that's something you worked on personally. Where would you say the inspiration came from, and do you have a favorite?
I definitely have a favorite. It's probably my favorite title of anything I've ever titled, and it's Frankie Muniz Fan Club Official. Because it just works perfect for that track, which is like the sickest, darkest, most evil track on the whole two records. But as far as that, I mean, obviously, like that's like the track that's horror music, and so it's referencing the 5th episode, which takes place inside of Harley's brain, and they're all the little Harleys running around, and they're all, obsessed with Frankie Muniz, so that's why that's called that. But if you listen to it, it starts off with a little delicate keyboard thing, and then goes crazy. As far as the other track names go, it was just like a big combination of, some things were very easy to name, like Harley was easy to name because it's their love theme, but I just tried to pick references or lines from the show that are memorable but abstract. Like, you should be able to look at the titles. Let's say what I wanted was, if you're listening to a song and you're like, I can't remember where that's from, and then you look at the title, you'll be like, oh right, this is called Deuces. And I remember that time when the Queen of Fables put up middle fingers and said deuces, and then you're like, oh, so this is Queen of Fables music. I'm just going to say one other thing about the titles. No, can't remember.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nicholas, did you want to go next?
Perfect. Thank you. Hello there, Nicholas, aka Sir Nick Justice here. So definitely a big fan of the show.
Thanks.
And being able to look back at the soundtracks and get those flourished memories of each scenario there. There was a huge dynamic range of type of music that went into the soundtrack. Essentially, how did you choose those type of themes to put that music in? So, for instance, Themyscira had that upbeat, hip hop type of beat to it. What made you choose those type of aspects?
For the soundtrack, I just chose again, there were certain tracks that like absolutely had to be on the soundtrack. Obviously the main theme song, Harley's theme, Ivy's theme, etc., all the main characters' themes. And then beyond that, I just chose what the best music was. It didn't really necessarily have to do that it was an important plot point or, or did anything. Sometimes just a song is good. And so that's how I picked it. The reason why there's so many different styles is because I was the whole music department on this show. Like, there was no source music. So, when they walk into an elevator and there's elevator music, that was written by me. And I didn't put the elevator music on there because it's good elevator music, but like, who wants to listen to elevator music, So
I love it.
And then I guess that's it. That's it for now.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay.
Hello. So I am curious, since Harley is a very erratic and high energy character, does that change your composing process compared to other things you've done? Because not only is her mental state constantly fluctuating, she is all over the place. And I'm guessing, you kind of have to have music that reflects that during certain parts, but in other parts, she can actually be quite mellow and down to earth.
Yeah, I mean, the producers, the showrunners have said a few times in interviews that this is like Gotham through Harley Quinn's eyes, right? And so I just tried to do the same thing with the music, which is like everything is completely amped up, you know? When you have a show that's like so colorful and fast paced, you have to write music that that complements that. Obviously the, you know, heartfelt stuff for big moments is different, but for like big fight scenes and stuff, you just have to be, you just have to keep up. You constantly have to try to keep up with Harley because she's bonkers, you know. So yeah.
Okay. Let's go back around. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. Kelly?
So what character would you say, if any, their theme or their music felt the most natural or came the most naturally just from watching the scene or from knowing the character?
That's a good question. Let me think for a second. I mean, you know, Harley's theme, the idea that her sound is like a cross between punk music and carnival music is sort of where the whole process started. And I think everybody else's sound is, I wrote sort of with that as the controlling factor or something, as like the canvas. Not sure exactly how to describe it, but and that like that's what Harley sounds like to me. You know, it wasn't a question. There wasn't a question in my mind about what Harley sounded like. Like I immediately knew what she sounded like, because you know I'm familiar with her, and so that was super natural. The other one that came really naturally was the Batman theme, and I think the reason is because it's the most up the middle, traditional superhero theme, and I wrote it that way because that's how Batman is portrayed on the show. He's the straight guy, you know. He like, I mean, obviously in his episode he turns into a baby, a big baby, but you know, I mean, he's basically portrayed on the show in the way that Batman is always portrayed. And so that was just a matter of doing my version of what everybody thinks of as a Batman theme song, you know? And so that was a pretty natural process for me too.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Nicholas?
Fantastic. So, you know, of course, season 2 being done, and now that we have both soundtracks out there, season 3 around the corner, you know, is there any type of change in approach that you plan to take when that soundtrack starts to develop?
I mean, I just want to say off the bat right now, I have absolutely no idea whether we're going to be renewed or not. That is like way above my pay grade. If we are lucky enough to get a third season, I think that some of the themes could use a little refreshing. I think that part of when you come up with a theme for a character and you commit to that theme for that character, then it frees up the ability to make moments for that character. So if the Harley theme is the same every single time, then there's a scene that's slightly different and changes one thing just because you've been listening to that exact same track play for the past 10 episodes or whatever. It just subconsciously reads to the viewer that there's something different happening here, right?
Okay.
And so that's a way to sort of help tell the show's narrative. So the reason why I say that is because I'm not going to throw out the entire first 2 seasons of score for the 3rd season, because that's what those, I mean, Harley Quinn's not going to show up. Well, maybe she will, but in a totally different outfit. Her look is not going to be significantly different for the 3rd season than it was for the first 2 seasons, and her music shouldn't be either. So, but with that said, these characters are growing and changing and building, and so I think that the music just sort of naturally and organically changes with them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello. So what I'm curious about is how much lead time do you have between episodes and composing? And did that change significantly between season 1 and season 2?
We did all 26 episodes as one thing. And it was just basically a continuous process. Generally on a TV show, you get 1 week per episode. I was lucky on Harley that I got average 2 weeks per episode. So 26 episodes times 2, 52 weeks was just like a year of writing Harley Quinn, basically, and like not stopping. And yeah, I mean, it was like I couldn't have done this show the way I did if I only had a week for each episode. It was sort of vitally important that I had twice that much time in order to make the music what it turned out to be. I mean, I think I would have come up with a different solution for the music had I only been given 1 week per episode. But I had the luxury of being able to really dig in and try different sounds and try to come up with unique instrumentation. And so, yeah, it was really like best case scenario when it comes to writing music for a TV show. I mean, and just beyond that, everybody who works on the show is the best. And it was just, everybody was on the same page all the time. There's really very little tension or friction at all. I think you can feel that in the show too, I think you feel that everybody worked on the show was having a great time making the show.
I'm going to circle back around to Kelly.
So in the actual albums, the songs appear out of order from how they appear in the show. And you said it's kind of a different take on the same story. What was your sort of narrative goal as a storyteller with switching that up?
So the way I thought of the 2 albums was that the beginning of the first album is sort of like a dramatis personae of the characters, right? You have to kind of let people know who the characters are in any story that you're telling. And so the score is like front loaded with character themes for that reason. And I think it also serves to kind of get the listener back into the world of Harley by reminding them of what these characters sound like. And then continuing along with the first record, it was like character development and also sort of setting environments, right? So there's the heist track, which sort of puts you in those scenes. There's the fight scene track, which puts you in those scenes. And then when it comes to season 2, now that's all in place, right? Season 2 is then like a deep dive and actually has some kind of narrative. I think it's basically in show order, with the exception of Only Love Sets Us Free, which I pushed back to the very end because for whatever reason, it felt, putting it at where it happens in the show, it felt like the rest of the record felt anticlimactic to me after that, because that's the track that plays when Ivy and Harley escape from the pit and kiss for the first time. And so, and it's just a giant piece of music. Like, it's just so big, that I felt like everything after that kind of felt flat. So I pushed it back to the end of the record. Everything else on on the season 2 track tells the story in show order. Does that make sense? I feel like I didn't answer that.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, all right. So with composing music for the soundtrack, I know you mentioned, having that carnival feel, of course, that Harley Quinn vibe. Was there any major challenging aspects that came to developing the soundtrack itself?
How do you mean? Just like logistically, or?
Like, for instance, if they said, "Hey, Kite Man, what would how would you pick his type of theme of music to go with if he was to have a theme song?"
Yeah, I come up with palettes in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting up a synth and typing in Ivy and seeing if any of their sounds come up, right? Sometimes that just works, and like it's like, oh, that sounds like Ivy, Poison Ivy, and that sounds, or like for Ivy, for example, here's another, like, she's all nature, right? So like in the search bar, I would put like nature, plants, green, like anything that sort of like conjured up her character in my mind. And then just sort of going through the things and say, oh, that sounds like Ivy, that doesn't sound like Ivy. And then you sort of whittle it down to the things that are the most, meaningful and direct. Yeah, as far as the orchestra stuff goes, it's harder to do that with the orchestra, just because these days people think of orchestra as like a thing, whereas it used to be, when you listen to a piece of orchestra and an orchestra piece, and there was a piano or a harp, like that would be a way. Those are like the sort of synth thing that I was talking about that composers used to do. Their palette is so much more limited than we have these days. So generally the orchestra stuff is just kind of a support to the character work. And then like for the guitar sound for Harley, it took me a long time to dial in that sound. That's just like finding the right distortion and finding the right, like all the different things to make that guitar sound like Harley, And then for the carnival sounds for Harley's theme, they're also like super processed, right? Because I didn't want it to just be like what you would hear at a carnival. It had to be different, kind of like distressed. So I took all those carnival sounds and distressed them in various ways.
Cool.
Aaron?
So I'm curious, if you could write music for any DC Universe characters that you haven't done so yet, who would be at the top of your list?
That is an excellent question. This is going to take me a minute. I wish I had like a list of DC characters. My mind's spinning with all the characters right now. I didn't actually get an opportunity to write a theme for the Penguin because he shows up and dies so quickly. And I also didn't get a chance to write a theme for Robin either. And obviously I'm not going to get a chance on this show to do a Penguin theme, but I'd be really into that. And then hopefully if we get a season 3, Robin, I think, is probably going to be part of it, and hopefully he'll have like a large enough role in season 3 so I can actually figure out what his sound sounds like.
Awesome, thank you.
Kelly?
So do you have a favorite character from the show, and not even necessarily musically, but just as a whole, one character that is either the funniest or just really connects with you the most?
Yeah, I think it's King Shark.
Same.
He's just like, I love Ron Funches so much. Like, he can't do anything wrong, you know?
Yeah.
He's just so funny. And it's so crazy. I think that a couple characters on the show have become canon in a way that other characters on the show haven't yet. I think people just think of the King Shark on Harley now as King Shark, you know? When the fandom happened and they showed the CG King Shark from the new Suicide Squad movie, it looked just like King Shark from the show without his hoodie on. And everybody was really excited that it looked the same, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, but honestly, I love all the characters on the show, and all the voice actors are so great. But I'm just gonna have to go King Shark.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nicholas?
Thank you. In regards to our fans out there, what advice do you have for those who do want to create music?
To create music? Practice. I mean, look, music is a lifelong pursuit, you know. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old, and I think most musicians who end up being professional musicians start really young, because it's just a different language, and you have to be fluent in that language. And if you don't learn it when you're learning other languages, it's always going to be like a second language to you. If you start music when you're a toddler or whatever, it becomes a first language. You know, you're bilingual as a composer. In my case, in English, and in music is my other first language. And not only do you have to start early, but you just have to make your whole life about music. Like, everything should be an influence to your music. You hear a bird singing outside, oh well, that's music. You hear a pile driver building a building, that's a rhythm, that's music. And like, sometimes those things are cool, so you just sort of have to view the world, use your ears to view the world in a musical way, like, all the time.
I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jared?
So I'm curious about the creative process in regard to starting and stopping. You mentioned you're unsure about season 3 yet, but do you at this time continually kick around what ifs and possibilities, or how do you go about approaching something again after having a hiatus from when you stopped composing? I'm guessing it could be challenging sometimes jumping right back into that universe.
Yeah, you definitely get rusted up, and you need to scrape the rust off and get the wheels going. I always think of it as like this big, huge steam engine train that has tons of cars, and just that idea of like the very slowly starting and then gaining speed, and so that's what it's like. And then you reach some sort of you get fast enough so that the bar on the side of the train starts kind of like moving instead of like going up and then falling down. It just becomes a continuous thing. So that's what it's like after a break. As far as kicking around ideas, like, these are on envelopes, but like, these are all this is like season 3 Harley Quinn ideas, because I just put the record out, so I've been listening to this music a lot, and something pops in my head, just write it down. And if it happens, but they're there in case I need them. That's the other thing I would say about if you want to do music for a living, like you better be prepared, you know, like if an opportunity presents itself, you need to make sure you have the goods to take that opportunity.
Kelly?
So when you first got this project, and we're thinking about writing Harley Quinn or writing for Harley Quinn, did you find yourself diving back into the comics at all, or you know, sort of just trying to think of the character and see what came to mind? Like, how did you really prepare yourself?
I had a self-imposed moratorium on listening to any DC score that anybody else wrote, from when I started working on Harley until we finished. And I've seen everything that DC has put out since Batman, the 1960s Batman series, until I started working on Harley. So I was like very intimately aware of what Superman sounds like from the 80s, you know, versus what Superman sounds like from the 21st century. But I didn't want to listen to any of that stuff while I was writing my version of what those characters sound like. I just wanted that to be kind of a abstract memory that informed the kind of music that I wrote for each character. But I worried that if I started listening to everybody's Batman theme, like Danny Elfman's and Hans Zimmer and all the Batman themes, that then I wouldn't be able to have my own sort of pure new take on that character. Yeah, that's it.
All right. In regards to the Harley Quinn, you know, it's opens up a world, I think, of possibilities and potential TV shows that could, you know, perhaps branch off of it as well. So definitely fingers crossed, of course, for season 3. Is there any particular projects or films that you hope to compose someday or would like to work on?
I mean, you know, whatever path led me to doing animation, like I didn't, you know, I had a very different musical career before I moved to LA 8 years ago. And then this 8-year journey sort of led me to doing animation. And it's like, it feels like a right fit for me, for the kind of music that I write. I tend to do big gestures, and like, you know, my music takes up a lot of room. And you can do that in animation in a way that you can't in live action, because everything, the whole sound, the dialogue, the sound effects, everything is a fiction. You know, it never existed anywhere. It's all perfect. You know, the voices are recorded in a perfectly silent recording booth. The sound effects aren't from a set because there is no set. And so as a composer, that gives you more room to do bigger gestures. And when I was a classical composer, that was just what my music sounded like: big, huge, sweeping gestures, you know. That's not to say that I can't rein it in for live action, like the stuff that I write on New Amsterdam is necessarily much more in the background, because that's what that show needs. So the answer to your question is, I would love to do more animation. And I wouldn't be against having a DC blockbuster film. Like, that would be okay too. And then beyond that, I came out here thinking that my sincerity and my earnestness and my depth of the classical music that I wrote was gonna like lead me to indie movies and award-winning movies and stuff. The path ended up being different, but I still would love to do something that was more, you know, Sundancey.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gareth?
So I'm curious how the current isolation situation has affected you in terms of not being able to go to Comic-Con and do these music and animation panels and stuff like that. Do you find that you've missed them, or is it a case of virtuals working fine for you, or where are you in that whole process?
Yeah, I did a virtual panel for Comic-Con, and I have no idea how many views it has, but that felt pretty normal to me, you know. I think that I don't think I want to get too deep about coronavirus, but talk about, you know, metaphysical, like what's going to last after this is all over. How much of the changes that we've made because of quarantine are going to stay because they're good ideas, you know. I guess that's a silver lining to me about what's happening right now. I think it's been a long time since we've had the capability to live a more streamlined existence by using technology. And I think this whole process is just accelerating that. And you know, that part of it, unfortunately, it's a dark cloud, like a really dark cloud. But that's one of the silver linings of it to me. I think that we're going to come out the other side of it as an industry, and just maybe as an industry, like with having been forced to think of creative ways to do things in a new way for 2 years, however long it's going to last until we get a vaccine. I think that's a healthy process for people who make creative stuff. It's like the what's that Werner Herzog, Gus Van Sant movie where they give each other restrictions and make short films? I can't remember the name of it. There's a reason why there's only 12 notes in an octave, because it just limits your choices. Otherwise, it's like you can do anything. That's really hard as an artist to have no restrictions whatsoever.
Okay, we're gonna do a couple more rounds, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Kelly?
So, I mean, you're a musical department of one for the show, but after you've first come up with a track, you know, and introduce it to the rest of the creative team, do you find that you're having to workshop it a little bit and go back and change anything, or is it kind of just accepted the first draft is the best?
Two things about that. I was the music department, but I did have a small team that would help me out with the mountain of music that we had to write. It's composer Matt Novak and Christopher French. I mean, they're credited on the soundtrack, which tracks they worked on. And they were invaluable, and they're amazing. So I was the captain of the ship and, you know, made final decisions. I think there's this unfortunate idea that of the genius composer, the delicate genius composer who sits down at his piano and, like, you know, writes everything. But that's not how it works in this town. it works just like any other department. Like the costume designer is not sewing every stitch on every costume. They have like a couple people who work for them that help them, you know, produce stuff, you know? And I just wish it was more understood. I think it's a disservice to everybody to just have this idea of the composer, the great composer, or whatever. You know, it's just another department, and that's trying to help tell someone else's story. As far as revisions go, it depends on the show. It depends on who the showrunners are. I've worked on some things where I got 5, 6, 10 revisions for a cue, and it's just never right. And I've worked on shows like Harley, where me and the showrunners have been on the same page since day one, and they generally had like from 0 to 2 revisions for each episode. They basically took it as is. And that's not, it's not a function of that I'm a better composer than anybody else. It's just that sometimes you have this like synergistic connection with the people, the project, and the people, and like they know. I think we were all just like, yeah, this is what this show sounds like, you know?
Yeah.
Nicholas?
Thank you. This will be my last question as well. In regards to piggybacking, how you mentioned, you know, picking up those natural sounds that create those rhythms that you're able to jump off of, and the fact that you also had to take a lot into consideration, like listening to other soundtracks to kind of get that Batman feel, as you mentioned. Is there any particular piece of music that you were most proud of, that one song that you really like, that's your song that stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Poison Ivy's theme, the second track on the first record, I can't remember what the Latin is, because it's whatever Poison Ivy official, you know, genus and species name is. Toxicodendron radicans, that's what it is. Her theme took me the longest to figure out, because her character is really complicated. She's like probably the most powerful supervillain on the show. I mean, controlling all plant life on Earth is like really, really powerful, much more so than like Clayface or any of the other main characters. But paired with that, she's just this indie emo girl who like is Harley's roommate, and so trying to figure out how to tell her story that both recognized how powerful she was, but also like also understood that she was just this kind of like messed up girl, you know, who had a really terrible childhood. And out of all the themes, Ivy's theme took me the longest to come up with. And what I did with the track, that particular track, is if you listen to it, it's one of the tracks where you can hear all of the ingredients of her sound, right? Starts off with the big epic version of her thing, and then gradually reintroduces each of the ingredients that I used to create her sound, builds it back up into the full sound. So if you're listening and want to listen to what my process is like, in fact, the order in which the sounds come is, if I remember correctly, the order that I built her sound up in. So I came up with the atmospheric stuff first, then the bass line, then the chords, then the melody, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think that's the one that I'm proudest of.
That's awesome. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out when I listen to it very tentatively. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay, so bit of an off the wall one here, but somebody asked me to make sure to ask this. Which artists do you think are on Harley's playlist?
It's funny you should mention that because I was just talking to my management, and I was saying that I want to make a Spotify playlist, which is what Harley and Ivy would just listen to when they're hanging out at home. And so I'm in the process of doing that. And you know, there'll be punk on there for Harley. There'll be emo on there for Ivy. Like, you know, just whatever they would listen to. Some nights, you know, they want to dance. Other nights they just want to like drink wine, candlelight, whatever. So I'm working on it, and hopefully it'll be out like within a week or two.
Awesome, thank you.